Can't it?
Hi, everybody. Rebecca Nelson here with Becker Vineyards, coming to you again for another virtual tasting. Seems we always are in the middle of a conversation when we start this live feed. Want to welcome everybody again. Tonight we're tasting another fabulous Cabernet. We have many of those. This is our 2017 Texas Cabernet Sauvignon. This can be found at your local Texas retailer, and it's supposed to be featured in the Cabernet section that covers, all Cabernets from all over. Other places are also putting it in just the Texas section. So you might need to check both of those areas if you haven't been able to find it or if you're looking for it. This particular Cabernet covers 5 different vineyards, so we've got a lot to talk about today. Tonight, we have our winemaker once again, John Leahy. We have Dr. Joe Becker with us tonight, and we also have our general manager, Bret. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the guys to get you guys going. I really hope everybody enjoys their wine, and cheers, everybody.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thank you again for a wonderful introduction, and a shout out. The first person on is from Amarillo, so welcome, Belinda. And Joe, would you like to lead us off with a couple of words?
Sure. So the first type of wine I ever learned to try was Cabernet, and I many have heard this story, but when I was younger, my mother was always a phenomenal cook, phenomenal French chef, and my father loved to collect old Bordeaux, and he'd gotten one of Robert Mondavi's old newsletters in the 80s to buy Bordeaux first growths. So my mother would cook these incredible meals, and my father would serve these incredible wines. And my mother had breast cancer when I was probably 9 or 10, and she survived it. And as I've talked before, the winery was sort of born out of a commitment or a project of my mother and father to kind of move on from that. And I remember, though, my father had promised my mom a wonderful trip to France once she got through all of her chemotherapy. And so we went to Bordeaux in, I would say, about 89, which was actually a great year in retrospect. Unfortunately, at the time, I had no ability to appreciate that. But I remember that we went to, we were able to sneak into Chateau Margaux somehow. I have no idea how. And I remember the age cutoff was 12, and I think I was like 10 or 11. And my mom said, "Act like you're 12 so we can get in there." And so I tried to act like, a year or two more mature than I was. And but what I also remember about that trip is spending time with my brother. My brother and I had a phenomenal dinner on the bank of the Dordogne one night when we were feeling a little rebellious. But I just have to share that because that's a favorite memory for me. But anyways, I'll turn it back to you, John.
No, I think that's great. I can honestly see Buddy saying that about that. But you guys are so tall, they probably thought you were 15.
Well, John, she's told all of us to act more than our age at times. I can vouch for that.
Am I the only one that never got that?
Yeah,
it's in your contract, guys.
Yeah.
No, I got the raised eyebrows a few times. That was probably
knock it off.
Yeah, exactly. It was awesome. So, Bret, when was the first time you had wine? Let's do first tonight.
Legal first.
Yeah,
no.
No.
When I was 15, I stole a bottle of 1976 ice wine out of my dad's cellar. Drank it out of the bottle. The only thing he could say is, "Did you really just drink it out of the bottle and not a glass?"
Well, and I honestly do think you can take this back to the roots of the Texas Hill Country. So my stepfather grew up on the banks of Great Creek in Sandy, Texas. It's a different Great Creek that's close to Fredericksburg, and they would make Mustang grape wine. And there were times that we would go out to the old hunting cabin that there would be these bottles that were in these old mason jars that you didn't know when they were picked, but you know they were there. And he would always say, "Well, if you guys want to try that, you could try it." But we always had to strain it through like a coffee filter or like a napkin because there was so much stuff in it that you couldn't drink it. So that actually was my first taste of wine. I'm not going to say what year or how old I was, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that he explained how the German settlers would make that first or make their wines was they would pick the Mustang grapes, they would put them in a vessel, whether it was a a carboy or an ice chest or whatever, and they would mash them. They would add sugar, and they would keep adding sugar until it stopped bubbling, and then they quit, and that was what their finished product was. And so every year they had no clue what the alcohol content was, whether it would make one year a 15 or a 20% alcohol, or one year it would stop early and make a 6. But that's literally how they made the old batches in their farmsteads. So.
Oh, one of my favorites is Doc telling the story about picking the property, and because they saw the wild grapes growing in the back, but talking to his neighbors, and like it goes back to the homestead time, early 1800s, about them making the wild grapes into wine, into a port style wine, but it was their ailment, their cure for stomach problems. The port wine, right, Bret?
Well, so I tried to get my father to share this story on an earlier podcast, and it may be too much information, but we have a wonderful neighbor, Ben Oyenski, who has the barn on his property that our Lavender House is modeled after. And he had told us that in the early 19th centuries, black cherry wine had been what they made, but was also sort of a cure for whatever gastrointestinal illness they had. And so when I was probably 20, or not 20, I mean, a little bit younger, my father missed like the first day in work ever in his life because he was sick. And about 2 weeks earlier, Ben Oyenski, one morning we were staying we have a back cabin homestead, and there was a knock on our door. And I remember because I always wake up early, and it was Ben Oyenski presenting us with black cherry wine. And so my father, who was very sick, drank the black cherry wine and recovered very quickly. So there's something. But I also remember when we first bought the property, my mother making incredible Mustang grape jelly. That was wonderful.
There's a heritage around here of that. People bring the things they like from home. So, honestly, okay. So I'm getting a few people checking in. Hello from Kansas. Hello from San Antonio. But I want to kind of dive into this wine because it's a very nice bottle of wine. So this wine is available at your favorite retailer throughout Texas. This is our Texas Cabernet, as Rebecca said earlier. But the first thing I want everybody to do, if you've poured a glass, is to go ahead and swirl, sniff, and taste. Man, so you asked earlier, Joe, I decanted about an hour ago. So and this is my standard, this nothing fancy. There is nothing fancy about this decanter. 1995 at Home Goods or something, but it works beautifully. It's an old ship's decanter. And I tell people to decant wine no matter what. Doesn't matter the age. Decant the wine, 45 minutes before service. You'll love it. It opens up. It's beautiful. So what are you getting out of this wine, Joe, when you first taste it?
Well, John, actually, I wanted to ask you, because one of the things I think has been pretty amazing about tasting your wines is that whenever we first taste a cab like this, you're able to build up just an incredible tannin structure. And you always give me a hard time that I'm a young palate, that I'm drawn to tannins, but it just seems like it's just a beautiful backbone that this wine just holds up over time. And it's got a beautiful, smooth, round feeling on the mid palate. I was just curious, how do you do that?
Well, Joe, a long time ago, these creatures called the Fae, they went out to pollinate the berries. I wish I could take really good credit for it, but Cabernet itself, actually, the reason Cabernet is king in a lot of parts of the world is because of that tannin structure. The Cabernet does produce a lot of tannins on its own. Merlot, not so much. The tannins of Merlot come out as longer chains to begin with. So Merlot always appears softer, even though it's got the structure where tannins in the cab and the pyrazines in the cab. The pyrazines, for those of you that don't know that, it's the portion of the berry that we are calling bell pepper or jalapeno or grass or even blackberry or coffee. All of those are on the same portion of that flavor wheel, or that scent wheel, if you will. So the tannins here, we literally get those tannins out by the extended maceration on the skins. So we'll start off with these Cabernets in tank for 4, 5 to 10 days cold. And this is the beautiful part, especially when Bret is coming in saying, this is what's coming up. This is the vineyard I need to pick. These are the numbers. What do you need? What are you doing? Why are there so many tanks of wine you haven't started fermenting? And I looked at it and I'm like, well, basically because I'm lazy, I just thought maybe tomorrow. So, I mean, he knows what we're doing.
And then I tell Rachel to add the yeast.
Yeast, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Go add the yeast. And the look on her face is like, I will, but it'll take 72 hours. You know, it's like, but because of that, we're getting those extractions, and that's why that tannin backbone is in there. It's just the simple matter of how we're treating them.
And I think that since this is supposed to be grower focused Wednesday, you look at this blend and I'm reading it on my computer over here, but
oh yeah,
you know, the highest percentage of the single thing is our Cabernet from the Becker estate property, and we keep talking about the high plains versus the hill country. The Ready Vineyard is higher than that in percentage, but there's 3 varieties that make that up, and then you have Ty Wilmoth's a cab from the Diamante Doble Dos. It's 80% Cabernet, 10% Merlot, 6% Petit Verdot, and then 4% Cabernet Franc.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you talk about a painter painting their masterpiece, and to me, when the winemakers get to go back to the cellar and grab whatever they want out of there, this is what kind of wine we can make. So,
oh yeah, that Cabernet Franc and that Petit Verdot, you know, and Drew Talent, the Petit Verdot that comes off of his property there up in Mason is just incredible. It really, we don't need to tell him that when it comes to taste wines on Friday. So
yeah, so a little snippet of what's going to happen on Friday. We're going to have Drew on. He lives out in Mason, Texas, where the internet's not so great. So he's going to come to the winery. We're going to meet, and then he'll actually be on here on Friday to talk about the Grenache, which is probably the number one hardest to get wine, I think, from the standpoint of Dr. Becker and Joe telling us to go find grapes to purchase. They keep saying add more Grenache, and I'm like, there's not a lot out there. So the one that we're going to try on Friday is going to be pretty special.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, Bret, we always tell you guys to add a lot of Petit Verdot.
Yeah,
and,
it's always Petit Verdot, Petit Syrah, right?
And I but it's right. And I think that this wine is very dark. It's very rich, and I think a lot of that comes from the Petit Verdot. I mean, it's this beautiful kind of. If you look at the color, if you look at the viscosity, it's a very beautiful wine.
Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful wine. But I would like to mention that 25% of this blend, the highest single blend, again, is from our vineyard, the Cabernet back there, and you really do get that. The Petit Verdot does offer a lot of richness to there, and that's why we use it, and that's why it's been used traditionally. I mean, it loves Cabernet. They're a beautiful pair together. So back to what you're getting in the wine, and then I want to dive into both the smaller portion. I think they're a very important component to this. But so, Bret, what are you getting out of this wine when you smell and taste it?
I get a lot of different bramble, and this is a term I'm stealing from Dr. Becker. He always says bramble, but I think that when you try this, you get the notes of the berry and you get the notes of the barrel, and then you also get this. To me, it fits exactly what I wanted in a Cabernet. Mm-hmm. Is it a big chewy Cabernet that when I swallowed it, I could taste it 5 seconds after it goes? No, but I think that from the standpoint of what a Cabernet should be, I think that this is there. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get on the back that when I grade a wine, when I'm tasting wine out of barrel, when I'm looking at blending, I do a very simple grading here. I do a 1 through 6. 1 and 2 are the front palate. 3 and 4 are the mid palate, and 5 and 6 are the back of the palate. And that's how my horrible handwriting, my bad notes, you'll see this in all these varietals, where I'm putting them at what age, at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, at what age they move around the chart. And that helps me to go back then later and start picking through. This does finish out for me, but it finishes out with a nice pepper edge, which I think comes from that Cab Franc. It's a very nice edge off the back of number 6. On there, and it's really an enjoyable finish to me.
And John, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I just truly, I love that Cab Franc. I love that it's just that slight hint of, I mean, just barely that hint of pepper that just integrates so well into that wine.
Yeah, and that is purely the Cab Franc right there. And I mean, I talk about looking at your cheat sheet. I'm trying not to look down or away, so I'm just going to hold the paper up here.
Yeah.
But the Cab Franc is 4% off of there, and that's the Ready Vineyards. And his Cab Franc has been really beautiful to watch and chart through its maturation as far as on the vine age. And we've got a stash of 2018 and 2019 Cab Franc in the back that is just incredible right now. But that pepper note is very dominant in there. Most Cab Franc has a dominant note of either bell pepper or grass or jalapeno even. That same pyrazine is actually approaching as a almost like a long pepper, an Indonesian long pepper, or a telecherry black pepper, more of a savory instead of a spicy pepper on there. So that's a beautiful combination here. So somebody asked about the barrel program. I'll jump into that, and then I want to get back to these vineyards because this is Grower Wednesday. Yes, I'll answer your questions as I can, guys, so keep them coming. But the barrel program here, the Cabernet was a dominant amount of French oak. The Cabernet Franc actually was almost all neutral oak when we aged it. And the Petit Verdot was a very little new oak, and it was mostly American. So the Merlot also saw a fair amount of American oak on there. And I chose those oaks according to varietal and what I thought that would express them the best. American oak does very, very well with both Petit Verdot and Merlot. It also does well with a few other varietals like Zinfandel and Tempranillo. But the overall program here, by the time we put this together, was about 20% new oak. Now, you know, we saw last week where we were doing something that was over 40% new oak, and this one is about 20% new oak. For me, new oak is the first 2 years we use a barrel. So 1 and 2 year old barrels. After that, I just consider it neutral. I take a more laissez-faire approach to the neutrality. There's some people who will track oak percentages out to the 9th year, and that's well and fine. But for me, the first 2 years have the biggest impact as far as sensory impact on there. So, Bret, the first year we used the Six Hearts Vineyard. So,
yeah, so this kind of goes back to another Jet Wilma story, and I got 1,000 of them. Most of them are not fit for public,
well, those are the best kind.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but Jet is like I keep going back to this. We have some of the best growers in the planet. We have the best growers in the state of Texas. I can say that with confidence.
Yep.
And
You're here.
There's a fire truck going by at Main Street in Fredericksburg, but the Six Hearts Vineyard, the Hearts are both judges in Lubbock, Texas, and they have some land that's just about 2 miles from Jet's house, and he is their vineyard manager for them. And I think that one of the things that when we look at a grower, it's always like, well, our program is here. This is our philosophy. What is yours? And if somebody says that their job is to make as many tons per acre as they can, they don't really care, and they're a commodity farmer, and we just kind of move on. And I think that from the get-go with that group and his brother Ty, it was always what is the best thing that we can grow and manage. And if you go look at these vineyards, they don't look like they've been abandoned. They look like a state park. They're immaculately clean. This year with the early freeze of Halloween. So normally we worry about late frost in the spring, but this year what whacked us was an early freeze before the vines went dormant. And we're going to see about a 50 to 60% reduction in the crop in Texas. Mm-hmm. But this particular vineyard at the Hearts, I just remember that as the fruit came in, and I think there might be a little batch of this that might make its own label by itself, if I remember right. I can't remember.
Hey, hold on now.
Yeah. And again, that's the cool part about what we do is if something expresses itself so well that we're going to let them have the recognition for doing a great job. And not only just that Cabernet from the Six Hearts Vineyard, Ty's cab that came off of this, and then the other components is what's making it what it is. But I really want to get, like, a lot of people ask me all the time, why do you make so many different wines? So we get yelled at for holding this bottle up and showing it on the label. Okay. New label, it's on your screen. This was a complete attempt to go after the Cabernets from California in the cab section in the market, that people come to the winery and they say, we only go to the cab section. Your Cabernet is not there. We don't even know who you are. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And that was the goal, to make this wine as good as what it is. And I think that's also why John had no like handcuffs about, you get to use any vineyard you want, just make the wine you can. And as we started making it, I was amazed that we took the percentage of hill country, the percentage of the high plains, and made this big, volume wine as good as what it is for, I think it retails for like $19.95.
Yeah, it really, it is an extraordinary value. The fun part for me, when we first came out with this wine, the first vintage, I was back in California visiting with some friends, and went to one of their winemaker meetings. These are very staid affairs where everybody's very serious and very formal. I poured this wine, and it was the curveball in the tasting, and it was a lot of fun because people were trying to guess what region of California it came from. And when I told them it was Texas, I remember the reaction of a very good friend of mine who used several adjectives that are not appropriate for general consumption about what he thought I actually put in the bottle versus what the label said. But the idea here is we do have some great fruit here. But back to the Six Hearts, yes, don't tell everybody about the 12 barrels I have stashed in the back.
It's coming. You could pre-order, people. Get online.
Get online and pre-order. There you go, salesman. Well, okay, so somebody just asked, they said their comment was, wow, 14.2%, but it didn't taste hot. Again, let me go into this. I've done it a few times. It's one of my favorite soapboxes. So Trish, thanks for asking the question. I love this soapbox. The idea here is about balance, people. Balance in wine. The alcohol should be one of the secondary or tertiary things that you notice about a wine. The flavor, the structure, the tannins, all of those things that we're actually going after. As a winemaker, you're not making alcohol, you're making wine. I don't really care what the alcohol percentage is, as long as it's in balance and it's not the first thing I taste. I could care less if it's 11% or 18%. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me most is how that's wine presenting itself. So it is, again, about balance. And I'll be nice and say, judge the wine according to the balance and whether you like it or not.
The only time I use alcohol to even, like, people say this has great legs, and again, when you hold the wine up, the legs.
That just means glycerol. It doesn't mean a damn thing about alcohol or anything else. I love that too. Yeah. I'm sorry if I've blown anybody's bubble out.
But the bottom line is that in legal labeling, under 14%, you can actually go 1.5% down or
either
up.
Side or up, as long as you don't bust that level. Yeah.
Bust the 14. Once you bust on 14, you only get 1%. So
half on either side.
Yeah. So you take.
Go ahead, Bret. Sorry.
Yeah, you take this at, like, legally, we could label this 14.2, but it could really be 14.8. And people get so whacked on the labeling side about what the alcohol is, that what I use labeling for, or the alcohol and labeling, is if you try a wine and you don't like it, and you're like, why does this taste so green? And it should be a Cabernet that you would expect to be 13.5. If it's like 12.2, they picked it too soon.
Yeah.
It didn't develop phenologically, and that's how I use it. It's not so much, or you have one that's, 15.8, and all you can taste is alcohol, and it's so out of whack that you can't taste the fruit, and you can't taste the barrel. And our goal always is to have a balance between alcohol, fruit notes, and the barrel program. And I think, again, that's what we do, and we've done it for a long time.
Yeah, we have. Okay, so what were you going to say, Joe? I'm sorry.
I think that just to go along with what Bret was saying, what you're saying, I think that a lot of what inspired my parents and has inspired my palate by proxy is that a lot of the older Napa cabs that have just such incredible fruit expression that really has held up over time, and just an incredible love affair with American oak. I think the other thing that to think about is that to remember that Cabernet Sauvignon is basically relatively speaking a newer grape. That it's it's basically the love child of. It's thought to be the love child of Sauvignon Blanc and Cab Franc, and it was our great the great producer of our freedom and democracy. Thomas Jefferson, one of his favorite wines, he loved Obrion, which he called O'Brien. And I loved the way that this wine is so integrated with the Texas Cab and the Cab Franc. I think it's amazing that we can do that in our state.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is. And, I just got another question about it was more a statement. I hate that some Texas wines are in Texas section while others aren't. Who determines what section of the wines are placed in the stores? And I'm sorry to say, it's not us. Otherwise,
Well,
it's kind of in the basket before you took them out of the line, But yeah, it's up to the stores. And
we like to toot our own horn that we're one of the few Texas wines that can hold our own in the non-Texas section.
Sure, that's exactly what I was going to say, Joe.
I'm sorry, Brett.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Look at that. Yeah, go ahead.
But, no, we can, but also I think it's also important to point out that a lot of the stores that have larger wine sections also have a wine steward, and they're there to help you, and that's what they do. Just please feel free to ask. They will. I'm also nosy when I go grocery shopping or when I'm in a bottle shop. My wife runs away from me when we get into the wine section because I kind of snoop around and see what people are doing. I'm like, hey, have you tried this wine? They don't know me from Adam. Hey, this is a really good wine. But the idea there is your wine steward's there to help too. So same when you're going out to eat, please use the Somm. That's what they're there for. They love that. And ask them specifically, do you have Texas wine? They will answer that question for you. So, all right, we need to cover our vineyard, which we hardly ever do. We talked about the back vineyard, but when were those Cabernet vines planted, Bret?
Well, this was a combination in 1992, that the original Cabernet vines, but we also planted another block in about 2001 that most of this percentage actually came off those newer vines. Mm-hmm. And I think that original block that is still there is still producing great Cabernet. The problem is it makes about 1 to 2.5 tons per acre.
Yeah, it's very
so
light.
commercially viable. Yeah, we're there. Don't look at the spreadsheet, right, Joe? We the spreadsheet doesn't matter.
Don't look at it. Do not pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, right. But the ones that were planted in 2001, and I also talked about this in earlier broadcasts, that I do think that most of the original vineyard that was planted in 1992 and 93 is on the wrong rootstock, in my opinion. And again, this is my opinion. It was planted on 5BB, and I think that what we need at our place is 1103P, which is And again, there's other places that 1103P is an epic fail, and I do think that as we travel and look at 86 different vineyard blocks, people call me all the time and go, "What is the perfect scenario?" I'm like, good luck. I can tell you what not to do. I can tell you what's kind of worked in our area, and if you move 5 miles to the west or 5 miles to the east, it's going to be a completely different story. So, I think that from the vineyard standpoint, these vines are something that we have been able to, commercially make a wine out of for a long time. And I think we're pretty proud of them. We go back there and, we spend a lot of time, and we love the growers that we have in the High Plains, but it's also fun to try a wine like this. It's 25% from the estate vineyard in Stonewall, Texas, along with the vines coming from the High Plains, along with the different varieties that different people grow. And I've also had people ask me, why don't you just pick one thing and do it? Or why are you blending with all these different varieties? And the bottom line is, in Texas, if we don't have 14 sites for Cabernet, then it's really hard for us to produce a Cabernet year after year, because of the fact one gets froze, one gets hailed, one gets, all the things that happen. And spreading that risk out is the reason why we're kind of sitting a little more pretty than maybe some of our other friends are, because they're not spreading it out to 14 different vineyards for these varieties. So.
Well, I got another question here. It's a very important one. It says, John, what cigar are you enjoying with this delicious wine? Well, I'm not allowed to smoke in the house. So I'm not currently, but I will tell you that my standard is an Arturo Fuente. And outside of that, there are a couple of other cigars that I'm not supposed to legally have here in this country that might or might not come from the Caribbean, but they're pretty good too. So there you go for cigars. Okay, guys, I need to ask food pairings. People are asking what food Wednesday. One person is sitting there in a rice casserole with tomato and cucumber salad. I'm coming over to their house for dinner. I'm just telling you that right now. So, Joe, what would you pick for wine and food pairing for this?
Well, let me just make one point, and I'm sorry, I always have to wax rhapsodic here. So I won't tell the story of my mother and I planting the first grapes, although I like to feel like these Cabernet grapes, which Mom and I planted long ago, the ones that are still there are the ones that are giving this wine the character, especially when you have a husband or father who shows up and telling you that you can't plant grapes correctly. So I like to feel like that character is expressed in the wine.
Well, Joe, I think that any grape that I ever planted there is worth like $60 a bottle. So yours should be like at least 100.
Yeah.
You know,
thank you, Bret. I appreciate that.
Okay. But what I want to ask is what father and son have ever come to a great agreement on how the sun works?
Yeah, no. Welcome to my.
Not since Icarus and his father. No, nobody.
Yeah, right. You know, my dad to this day asks, so I know you like making wine, but when are you going to get a real job?
Well, John, as I said last week, that the motto of the Texas wine industry is "Don't quit your day job."
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think I could clean pools for a living then. So what?
Yeah, just to be boring, I always think about this wine just with an incredible tenderloin. You know, I was thinking about
Bret, you can't use that.
Sorry, Bret. But I just have to say, I was thinking about being at the Perini Ranch Steakhouse, having one of his world famous tenderloins, and Tom may or may not smoke a cigar or two, but I think it would be just an incredible pairing for both.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay, Bret. He stole your thunder, but
I'm sorry.
No.
That's been his answer for like 22 weeks now.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, John, I'm going to drop the mic right here.
Yeah.
Tenderloin.
Boom. That's it. Tenderloin. Nobody can even touch salmon. Jody and I have had some incredible salmon from the Copper River Basin up in Alaska. And when they're running up the river, they call them Copper River Reds. And that run is the most incredible, meaty. We've had it with this Cabernet and it's incredible. So I'm going to say grilled salmon, and somebody on here is doing, let me go back through the fresh tuna tataki, which sounds, oh yeah, right. And then somebody else was doing a chicken casserole. Might be a little hard for the chicken casserole, but probably good. And at the end of the day, doesn't matter.
I think you could almost swing a coco van.
You could. Absolutely, you could. Absolutely. The other thing too, that I'm going to, every Frenchman in the world is going to hate me when I say this, but the cassoulet with the chicken and the sausage and stuff. And I know that's not the traditional wine for the cassoulet, but it would hold up to a really hearty bean dish too. So
I think this would go good with everything. That's the problem that I have.
Yeah.
Well, if we're at home, we're going to drink this all day long.
Try. Yeah. Yeah. It may not go well with a lemon tart for dessert, but I wouldn't be a bit.
Actually, it might.
Yeah. I know with that cab going with that lemon cake, that was incredible. Yes.
With the right dark chocolate, this would be great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A flourless chocolate torte would be great.
Oh.
The other thing would be a gorgonzola cheesecake would hold up to this with that fat and the tannin. Okay, everybody at home, we're obviously all very hungry. So before I forget, and we want to hit Bret, would you take us through the next couple of weeks? We got a ton.
Oh my God, I have to read the list. Okay, so
yeah,
Friday is going to be Drew Talent. That's going to be a very amazing tasting. Next week we're doing the Library Vertical with the Wilmeth Cab. So if you haven't ordered this yet and you want to have the vertical from the library, normally this is, $60 or $80 a bottle. And I got permission to send this vertical tasting. So we're doing the 2014, 2015, 2016 vertical of Wilmot Cab next week. The following week, we're going to do a fun thing with Sanye, this little small winery in California called Coppola.
Yeah, you might have heard from
this,
Francis Ford Coppola. He made a couple independent movies.
Yeah, here's the bottle, and
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
50% Texas, 50% California. That'll be
It's a
fun.
great
We're gonna have their
cocktail.
winemaker.
Yeah.
We're gonna have their winemaker on. We've got confirmed. The following week is Father's Day, and you guys need to watch to see our Father's Day bundle.
Oh,
It's gonna have something that you want to drink. It's gonna have something that you want to store your drink in. It's gonna have something to open your drink. It's gonna have something to put a part of the grill, like we're trying to cover everything. We got a hat, a Becker logo hat, and then a rib rub that you can put on the grill.
Mhm.
And then the week after that, we're going to do the Canada family vertical, so that we're getting stuff out of our cellar, the 2015, the 14, and the 12. And that's as fast as I could say it, not be like an infomercial.
Well, I want to let everybody know too, when we get to the week with Coppola here in 2 weeks, the Unida blend, excuse me, the 50-50 blend on there, that I want people to question. So Corey Beck is the gentleman from Francis Ford Coppola that'll be joining us. And years and years and years ago, Corey Beck was the winemaker when I was a half cellar rat, half not cellar rat, but tasting room guy at a little winery called Summers. And so I've known Corey off and on for a long time. You need to ask him really weird questions like, do you all speak English in California? Just tease him about being from California.
Well, the problem is they apparently on John's resume, they said they never hired John because John hadn't seen any of the Godfather movies.
Yeah, that wasn't me. That was my wife. I'm desperate. I asked Corey, like, do you please ask Francis if she ever meets him, have him ask her why she never watched the Godfather movies. I think it'd be riotously funny until somebody said, or you're going to end up in divorce court.
And he doesn't make any big deal wines like Inglenook or anything like that.
Yeah,
No,
no,
not at all.
none of those
Yes.
great wines. No, not at all. Yeah.
Small time.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a lot of fun. I hope everybody is able to join us. We've got a lot of good food pairings. It's also, somebody is saying it's just great to drink by itself. And you know what? It is. It's a great wine to have as a glass, as a porch wine. So with that, I think just a few closing words here. We want everybody, there are a lot of things happening in our society right now. We really appreciate everyone's hard work in keeping us healthy. We also, our hearts go out to those families and people who are, without getting too political, we understand that there are things happening, and we wish everybody to be very safe. At the end of the day,
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, sir.
I've thought about this a lot. I've thought that I'm glad my mother didn't have to live through the coronavirus selfishly, because I know that my mother, it would be difficult to keep my mother home. And I know that my mother would have cared deeply about everything else that's going on in our country. And it would be hard to keep her out of it. And that's how I was raised.
It would have also been very hard to argue against her. So, there's
Yes.
that too, Joe. So maybe it would have been fun to see her too. Well, listen, everybody, we all want everybody to be safe at the end of the day. And thank you for joining us. We enjoy your support. It means the world to us. So we want to raise our glass to all of our friends and family out there. To my niece, who is a police officer in San Antonio, please,
Cheers.
be very careful. And good health and great wine to everybody. So cheers.
Cheers.